Hi, everybody. I am Cassidy Quistorp. I am the director of Klamath Film. And with me today is Dustin Morrow. Dustin is the creative mind and director behind The Mall Man. Dustin, thanks so much for being here with us and being part of the 11th Annual Klamath Independent Film Festival.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for programming my film and supporting independent filmmakers.
Oh, heck yeah, we're all about it. So I love the lightheartedness of this film. It made me laugh out loud several times, which just kind of adds to that funny dichotomy between this setting where it's, depressing, it's a
Yep.
mall, it's early 2000s.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of decide these different establishing shots, like showing the mall and kind of the emptiness of it, along with the lack of color in the film and also balancing this humor with it as well?
hmm yeah, I mean, if you look at sort of narratively what happens, it's pretty bleak, and so you have to make it palatable and something that an audience wants to watch. The goal was not to sit there and bum everyone out, and so yeah, doing it was sort of like as a dark comedy and with a kind of like a slightly acidic wit was the idea from the beginning. I was also thinking a lot about like Death of a Salesman and Arthur Miller and those sort of that sort of the themes that he was kind of dealing with too. I grew up in Illinois, downstate Illinois, and we had one mall near us, and it was a focus of social activity for teenagers, like a lot of malls in the 80s and 90s. And Walmart moved into the town, and Amazon moved into the world. And like so many malls, it found that it was suffering greater and greater losses over time. Stores were closing. They were not investing the money in keeping the mall up, and so you started to see buckets on the floors catching leaks. You started to see cracks in the walls that weren't being repaired, and it just got increasingly dark. And then eventually, all of the stores that you would recognize as being a part of malls of the 80s and 90s moved out. Some sort of mom and pop stores moved in because the rents were by that point very low. And then eventually they moved out as well. And it was literally, you could just watch the mall actually get dark. They started shutting the lights off to various wings when there were no more tenants in those wings. And they also started to shut off the heat. And so you would go to the mall and it would be alternately kind of warm or freezing, depending on where you were walking in the mall. Until finally there was a lone GNC vitamins store that was the last store left. They had shut off all the lights in the mall and all the heat. And so you would walk into this cavernous, dark building and then walk through this pitch black, freezing wing of and then you would see this like a beacon, the bright light of GNC
Oh
in
my
the distance. And I don't know why they hung in there as long as they did, but eventually they left and the mall was closed. And it was just really, like a lot of Gen Xers, it was just very sad to me because it was such a central part of being a teenager for me.
Totally.
I didn't have the full like Fast Times at Ridgemont High experience where I was spending every minute of every day there. But it was certainly a place I went with my friends. I saw a lot of movies there. I bought a lot of Orange Julius. I bought tapes at Sam Goody. I bought books at Walden Books, B. Dalton. When I was a kid, I used to get toys at KB Toys. Used to go to Spencer's Gifts and look at the posters. It was just all the things that the character in The Mall Man says when he's trying to gin up some enthusiasm for his failing mall. Those were all experiences I had. And it got me thinking when that mall closed about the mall as a social space and what we were losing kind of culturally, in a more macro way. Just thinking about how people, young people especially, can spend all of their time, not all of their time, but studies have shown they spend most of their social time online. That they're interacting they're interacting with their friends more online than they are in person, by a considerable margin. And there's a question as to what is lost there. And the mall was a facilitator of that kind of interaction. It was a meeting point. It was sort of an analog version of, I don't know where they're meeting now, chat rooms or
I right.
TikTok or whatever, wherever. I'm too old to know, the actual sites and places they're going to meet. Um, but so I was really thinking about that, especially as somebody too, as a professor who works with young people, who works with people in their late teens and early 20s. And I'm now getting a generation who has never known the mall.
Hmm.
It's like the first time, like I'm getting a generation that has doesn't have any experience with that kind of social
Wow.
interaction. And so they've lived their whole lives online.
Hmm.
And it's interesting to see what that's done to their brains and what that's done to the way they're interacting with each other. Even in my limited exposure to them, like in the class, I can just see that they interact with each other in the classes in a way that's different than I used to when I was in college.
That's
Um,
really interesting. And I was definitely going to ask you about kind of being a professor and um, different things you take away from this upcoming like generation and the people you're teaching now. And it's funny because even when I was in high school, like 2010s, 2014, it was the mall. Like that was where you went, you got your
mhm.
dive a shake from there and you built a Build-A-Bear. And like, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm also
You
so,
were probably the last.
I
You were
know,
the last dying group that
really,
doing that.
yeah, I got in there. But yeah, so with this, new generation of kids and who you're teaching, what has teaching film kind of shifted for you? And like, what are you seeing now with these kids, whether it be like different inspirations or what they're interested in or how you're teaching your classes?
Yeah, I've noticed a couple of things. I mean, just from a skill set point of view, um, because the digital and computers have democratized media production to the point where anyone can do it
Mhm.
for no cost. You can make a film on your phone. You could edit the film on your phone. You can even upload it to YouTube and stuff. So in a sense, you can distribute the film on your phone, which is amazing. And when I started teaching 20 years ago, I had to teach like how to use cameras, how to use editing software. I had to teach all the technical portions of that. And there's still a little of that today, but not nearly to the degree that it was when I started teaching. Most of the students coming into my class have been editing movies and shooting movies since they were like little kids. So they know how to use cameras. The
Yeah.
good thing about that is it means we can start a little deeper in the syllabus than we used to be able to, because I can sort of, it's cool because we get to make more stuff during a term than we used to be able to, because they already have the skill set to do that. It doesn't mean that they have any idea how to tell a story with those tools. They know how to use the tools. So it's my job to teach them how to tell a story, and that's the fun part of my job anyway. It's teaching somebody how to use a camera is not very interesting, but teaching them how to use a camera to convey thought and emotion and feeling is really fun.
Right.
So I've noticed that. The other thing I've noticed in terms of their intention or their long-term goals is that when I started teaching, every student kind of wanted to be like Steven Spielberg or Gus Van Sant, right? Like a reputable indie filmmaker or like a big blockbuster Hollywood person. They were either going to Hollywood or they were going to go and try to make like their gritty indie films. And I see I mean, occasionally I still see that student, but those students are rare now.
Huh.
Now what they want to do is they don't even want to become directors, which used to be the number one job choice for film students. They want to be what they would call content creators.
And creators.
They
Wow.
want, yeah, so they want to work in digital spaces. They want to make stuff for the web. They want to make stuff that only exists on the web, which is pretty. It's a pretty alien thought to me as somebody who still sees a lot of limitation in what the internet is able to facilitate.
Right.
I mean, there's great things about it, but I mean, if I were them, I would still dream of like having my movie in a theater in front of a bunch of people that I'm sitting with and listening to them react to something I've made, not like throwing something up online and having no idea who sees it or how they're seeing it or what their reaction is once they're seeing it. So that's a little strange to me, but it's interesting and it makes my job exciting as I have to continue to modify the way I teach and what I teach and the perspective to it, which I bring to
Yeah.
teaching media production.
Absolutely. And this is such an interesting conversation for me. I didn't go to film school. I have like an environmental science background. And so for me, storytelling is all about, telling different conservation stories and stuff like that. So I feel like I fall in between where I never thought about films being played for audience or like in a screen or anything like that, but also not in the sense of content creation where it's just like to be online, but actually just to share the story and like the heart itself. So that's so interesting that you kind of get to focus more on that bit now too.
Mhm.
Where it's really at kind of the heart of the story and why we make films and everything like that in the first
Mhm.
place. But what an interesting change as a professor to see. But yeah,
How did
Dustin,
you find your way from environmental science to running Clamp Film?
it is Klamath Falls is the land of opportunity, and
Mhm.
we moved here 3 years ago, and so I have always loved kind of environmental filmmaking and stuff, and became a
Mhm.
Klamath Film member, and
Mhm.
saw that they were hiring, and I was looking for a job, and so it all
Mhm.
kind of worked out really well, and now I get to talk with wonderful filmmakers and storytellers who specialize in all sorts of topics, which is really fascinating. And do I feel out of my element and out of my wheelhouse a lot of the time? Absolutely, because I do not have that film background and can't
That's
always
cool because you're constantly learning, right?
exactly. So it
Yeah.
makes my job really, really fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like I'm just kind of like totally picking your brain right now, like a 20-minute film
Go
school.
away.
But yeah, Dustin, you're an all-around creative. I mean, like you are an author, you have done film and photography and TED Talks. So how do you blend all these different skills into making a film and into just getting to kind of portray all these different creative outlets and balancing all of those?
Mhm. Um, yeah, it's all about like experimentation and trying to do stuff that I can learn from, and that it's largely about the experience for me and less about what the final product ends up being.
Mhm.
Although I try to make the best final product I can, but most of the projects I undertake because I feel like a lifelong student. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I work in academia and not in Hollywood. I did work in Hollywood for a few years, and I didn't really like it. I really missed school. Um, I missed being around learning
Yeah,
and being engaged in that process myself. And I wanted a career that kind of paid me to learn. And so that's what I have. And so I see all of these things as complementing each other. My passion is for cinema and all of my writing that I do, and my work in um, audio drama and photography and podcasting and all that stuff kind of complements the work, and it all stems from my work in film, which
yeah.
is my great love for my entire life. So yeah, it all kind of dovetails.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand that for sure. It's just kind of sharing these stories and really kind of following your passion, which can always lead down different roads. But for people who may be watching who are interested in filmmaking, as kind of a film professor, a film guru, what might you tell independent filmmakers or people out there who are interested in maybe kind of taking the next step into filmmaking?
Hmm. Well, if they're young, I would tell them to go to film school. There's a
Nice.
lot of, I mean, there's a lot of people that say it's not necessary, and it's not. I mean, there is a degree to which you can learn by doing it, and you will learn a lot from being on a set and a lot from making stuff. And it's true that like the first 10 things you make as a young filmmaker will be terrible and unwatchable, but you should make them anyway because the 11th will be better, and eventually you'll know what you're doing. You'll learn from your mistakes. I still learn from my mistakes, and I've been doing this forever. But I do think film school is important because it will expose you to a lot of lines of thinking that you didn't know were even out there.
Mhm.
And I think it's also important to get an education in film theory and film history, which any good film school will provide you, along with the kind of nuts and bolts instruction in how to make films. Understanding where your art comes from and the history of your art. And luckily, like film is only 100 years old, a little over.
Wow.
And so there's not a lot to learn. It's not like you have to go and learn all of the eras of painting going back to like the whatever hundreds of years ago. There've only been so many advances in technology and movements in creatively, and new modes of address, and so you can learn all those things, and it will enrich your work to know that stuff. it, you know it drives my students crazy sometimes. I have to advise students as part of my job, and they're always like, why can't I just take like editing and screenwriting? Why do I have to go take film history? Or why do I have to go take like the study of the French New Wave or stuff like that? And they're like, I don't care. And I'm like, you should care. Like, you should want to know. If you were a photographer, you should want to know like how photography evolved over time. If you're a painter, you should want to know what the great movements in painting, because it will change the way you work. So
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate. It comes as no surprise as a film professor for film education, and I think it's you can never stop learning. And what's cool about film as a field too is that it's always changing. It's always evolving in technology, and also like the kinds of work that people do and how they get that work out there.
Mhm.
So you never stop learning. It's one of the reasons I like to do it, because again, I like to learn. So
Yeah, absolutely. Spoken from like a true professor.
yeah.
So you're no stranger to film festivals and the film festival circuit and everything. In this day and age of like quick content and just made things made for websites and just for online, just more content out there. What would you say to kind of vouch for independent filmmaking and independent film festivals and kind of just the spirit of indie filmmaking?
Yeah, it depends on who you are. The value of independent festivals, film festivals, to their communities is huge, because it brings work that would otherwise never play in most of the locations where it's playing, even big cities. Big cities are programming fewer and fewer kind of micro budget or kind of daring filmmaking. It's mostly Hollywood stuff. But especially true in like smaller places like Klamath Falls. Like Klamath Falls is whatever movie theaters you have around there, they're not playing like really daring, avant-garde, weird stuff, or stuff that was made for $5. They're playing, superhero movies and horror films. So for the community, a community that values like the arts, that's very important. For filmmakers, independent film festivals are important as meeting spots, essentially, because we go off and we do our work all over the country. You work with your small group of collaborators. And especially now that a lot of distribution is online, it's streaming, it's all through the internet. There are fewer and fewer places to get together as artists, as filmmakers, and trade ideas and foster potential new collaborations. And festivals are great places to do that. So, what we call like cynically networking, but is really like social engagement. It's like what I was talking about at the beginning of our talk about the mall. Like it's like a microcosm of that. Why should filmmakers have to find each other online when we can go to a film festival and find each other face to face and foster deeper, better bonds with each other?
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself, Dustin. I love it. Well, unless you have any final thoughts or anything else to add, we've just really so enjoyed chatting with you today and are so excited to be showing Them All Man at the 11th Annual Klamath Independent Film Festival. So thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah, and thank you again for supporting independent filmmakers. I don't know that your average audience understands how little there is in it or how hard it is to put on a film festival. What an incredible amount of work it is, and it's great that there are folks like you out there who are carrying the torch and doing it because, as I said, it's important work you're doing.
Well, thank you, Dustin. That is so kind, and I appreciate the ego boost a little bit there. But so great chatting with you today, and thank you so much again.
Yeah.
Awesome.